Hi, my name is Jason Shurka. Most of you probably know me for releasing a document titled The Pyramid Code on September 9th of 2020 at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. A very powerful document, and a document that was given to me by an organization known as TLS, otherwise known as the Light System. Now, most people who know me today know me for that story, and pretty much the life-changing events that happened starting on September 9th of 2020 in my personal life, and therefore in the public eye, and how certain things just started unfolding. But very few people actually know my story before then, and what happened in my life leading up to that point. So recently I found it interesting because a lot of people have been asking me, what's your story? Who were you before you published the Pyramid Code document? Who were you before all of this has happened? Who were you before this major turning point in your life? So I'm making this video to explain just that, to tell you all the story of what happened in my life from day one, from the day that I can remember, all the way until today. Because the story is much wider than just what happened on September 9th of 2020. There was a major series of events that sort of allowed me to lead up to that moment in my life. Now, my intention of sharing this story is to show you that no matter how hard life gets sometimes, in our deepest hardships are our biggest opportunities. Now, I'd like to preface with the fact that although the story I'm going to be sharing with all of you today consists of a series of very painful and in many cases traumatic events that I went through, I'm not telling you all this story to be pitied. I'm telling you all this story, number one, because I think many of you will be in resonance with it, because I'm sure that we've all gone through more or less the same thing in our own unique and individual way. That's why I'm sharing this story. And of course, what I said earlier, the biggest lesson is the fact that in our greatest hardships exist our greatest opportunities. That is my intention of sharing the story that I'm going to share with all of you today. So let's begin with day one, the day I was born. I was born on June 26th, 1997. And yes, that makes me 24 years old. And the reason why I'm sharing that with all of you is because another major lesson that I've learned on my few years here on Earth, in this form at least, is the fact that it's not about how old you are. It's not about how many years you've lived. It is about what you've done with the years that you've lived, what you've done with the experiences that have come your way, with the hardships that have come your way, with the obstacles that have come your way. Again, what you do in the years of your existence is more important than the number of years in which you've existed. So that's another lesson that I'd like to share sort of indirectly through sharing this story with all of you. So, June 26, 1997, I am born into this physical reincarnation. As a really little kid, I always enjoyed different things. I thought differently, I asked different questions. I'm sure many of you have as well. That's probably why you're watching this video right now. But my questions were always about, what is the universe? What is God? I was very interested in space and the stars and things of that nature. And people kind of looked at me confused when I was asking those questions at about 4, 5, 6 years old, because they didn't understand what to answer me. They didn't even understand why I was asking those questions at such an age. But that's just who I was. So my first memory was when I was 4 years old. I remember my great-grandfather passed away, and my mother sat me and my older sister down and told us that our great-grandfather has passed away. And before I cried, before I was upset, before I reacted in any way, my first instinctual question was, how did he die? And she said, well, he went to sleep and he never woke up. And I thought that was the most beautiful thing in the world. But people around me were confused. They didn't understand why this 4-year-old isn't crying that his great-grandfather passed away. And already subconsciously, I started feeling like people were looking at me like there was something wrong with me. Well, 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old comes around. And I'm interested in really different things. I ask different questions. But everybody around me my age was still imaginative. So even though it was out of the ordinary, it was still accepted because we were still in our imagination phase, right? So we could ask out there questions and not be judged. Then I turned 8 years old, and then I turned 9 years old, and now my grandfather passed away. Now my grandfather had Alzheimer's. He was suffering for as long as I could remember. When he passed away, when my mother came and told us, your grandfather has passed away, I didn't cry, I wasn't upset. On the contrary, I was happy for him. And again, I was faced with a lot of backlash of, how can you think that way? Your grandfather is dead. From my friends, from certain individuals, how can you think that way? He died, you should be sad. Why aren't you sad? I remember somebody told me, you have no soul. Your grandfather died and you're not upset. So I did what any other little boy would do who wanted to fit in, who didn't want to feel weird and who didn't want to feel like an outcast. And I put on a mask. I changed who I was in order to fit in. And again, this is where I think probably many of you will probably resonate with this story, because I know so many of us have done this. Consciously, subconsciously, it doesn't matter. We all go through this. For a period of almost 10 years, I wore a mask. From the age of 9 till almost 19 years old, I wore a mask. When I was in elementary school, I did what was expected of me in elementary school. I wanted to be very normal, so I did what the cool kid would do. I put myself in the limelight. I would always mess with the teachers to make people laugh. I would be the class clown. And I'm still funny, don't get me wrong, right? I did this not being me, just to fit in. And then middle school came around and I did different things. And then high school came around and I started drinking and partying and throwing the parties and doing everything that I can possibly do to fit in. And holy Lord, did I do a good job. I did such a good job that I forgot who I was myself. I forgot that my mask wasn't me. And it came to a point where I was so identified with my mask, I was so identified with this persona that I put up, that I actually thought I was that person. When I was 14 years old in 2011, a series of very painful events began in my life for a period of 4 years. It started with dislocating my left shoulder. And I didn't do anything. I went to reach for my wallet while walking on a boardwalk with my older sister, and my shoulder popped out of place and came right back in. It was the most painful experience, but at least it was back in its socket. I was then in a sling for a few weeks. I went to see the doctor. They told me I had to get surgery. I went through with the surgery. I was under the impression everything was going to be okay. So of course I continued living my life just as I was. I continued living my life with my mask on. I continued living my life disconnected from the true essence of who I was, just to fit in. And everything was fine until 1 year later, I went kneeboarding. And as I was kneeboarding, it's like wakeboarding, but on your knees. I fell off the kneeboard because a wave came out of nowhere, something small. And this part's a little graphic, so viewer discretion is advised. My hand got tangled on the rope of the boat, and I was being dragged in the water at about 30 miles an hour by my limb, this limb actually, to a point where not only was my shoulder popped out of its socket, but it was broken. And at that point, I knew I had to get surgery again. So I went into emergency surgery, which was exactly 48 hours after the accident. That was the soonest the surgeon could see me. And my shoulder was so loose from the accident that even if I sneezed, my shoulder would pop out. It was one of the most excruciating pains I've ever felt in my life, but I had to deal with it. I go into the second surgery. The doctor tells me, Jason, everything went successful this time. But if you dislocate your shoulder again, I don't think we can do a third surgery. You're going to need a mechanical shoulder. And that really raised the alarms in my mind. And I said, Jason, you have to be careful. Whatever you're doing, even though I didn't do much to make things like that happen, I was just living my normal life like a normal teenager. He said, whatever you do, you make sure that shoulder stays in place. And that's exactly what I did. And of course, I kept living my life and everything was fine. And I kept my mask on and I stayed disconnected from the true essence of myself just to fit in. And after a couple more years of being disconnected from myself and wearing my mask, I went to sleep one night and I woke up in my apartment in New York City with a dislocated shoulder. And that was the lowest point of my life. I didn't want to get out of bed for 3 days. I was crying my eyes out. I didn't know what to do. The only thing I could think about was the fact that by age 18, I was 18 at the time, it was in the year 2015, I would need a mechanical shoulder and I was going to be handicapped for the rest of my life. I didn't want to face it. I didn't want to look at it. I didn't want to even deal with what that would possibly mean. So I popped it back into place and I didn't say anything. I did not say anything because I did not want to face it. But then it kept happening. And I didn't understand, why is this happening? I'm not doing anything, at least consciously. I wasn't aware of what I was doing because it wasn't my awareness that I was so disaligned with myself, so disaligned with my purpose and my destiny. But there came a point where I had to face it. I had to tell my family. I had to go see the doctor. And the doctor said, you're going to need to do another surgery. And he told me he was going to do his best to save my shoulder one last time before needing a mechanical shoulder. And I was so grateful, but I was so scared. That was around April of 2015. And I told him, I said, Doc, how far out can we schedule this surgery? I'm still in school. I want to have the summer ahead of me. Let me at least live and be and enjoy before I go into this surgery where I don't know what's going to happen next. I don't know if it's going to be successful. And he said, we can do it in January. Just be careful. I said, okay, I will be careful. So I decided before this surgery, I really wanted to go on a trip. So I sat with myself and I said, where do you want to go, Jason? Where do you want to go? Boom, Thailand came into my mind. I'm going to Thailand. I'm going backpacking. I sat my parents down and I said, Ima, Abba, I'm going to Thailand. I want to go backpacking. I want to have that experience. And they looked at me like I was crazy. They're like, dude, you're not going to Thailand by yourself. You're 18. Are you crazy? And I said, okay, what if I go with friends? They didn't even want to hear it. So I spoke to a few friends. We put together a group. There were 4 of us that were going to go to Thailand all together. It took a lot of convincing, but my parents finally said, all right, you can go, no problem. Anyways, a couple days before the trip, 2 of our friends drop out, and now it's me and my buddy. We get to Thailand, we're in Bangkok, we go around the islands, we're having the time of our lives. We're 18 years old, I'm just about to turn 19. It's June of 2015, having the time of my life, meeting people from all around the world, seeing how these people live in villages, and just incredible experiences all around. Every day we're waking up, going hiking, swimming in the ocean, really an incredible experience. And then one day my buddy got a phone call and he had to go home. So, of course, my parents said, you're coming home with him. And I said, listen, I love you guys, but I got this, I'm responsible, I can do this, I'm an adult, everything's gonna be okay. They didn't like it, but they accepted it. My buddy went home, I'm now in Thailand by myself, 18 years old, having the time of my life, really one of the most liberating experiences I've ever had. So naturally, from all the hiking and the running around, every so often you cut yourself, you scratch yourself, whatever, no big deal. You know, it's a big adventurous trip, especially when you're backpacking. So there was this one cut that I got on my shin, on my left leg to be exact, right above my ankle. And I didn't think much of it. I cleaned it a little bit, put some water in the ocean, whatever. Didn't think much of it because I had a lot of scratches, a lot of cuts, and I thought it would be okay. Well, one day passes with the cut, it's hurting a little bit, everything's fine. 2 days pass, it's hurting a little bit more. 3 days, 4 days, 5 days pass, and it's getting bad, and I don't understand what's going on. So I go get some hydrogen peroxide and iodine, and I try cleaning it and do whatever I can do just to make sure it doesn't get infected. So at this point, I'm on an island called Koh Phi Phi, and I was traveling by ferry to an island called Koh Samui. I'm on this island on day 5 of my cut on Koh Samui. Massages in Thailand are about $3 an hour. Best time of my life. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that's what I was doing. It was incredible. Now I went to the massage lady and I told her, hey, just make sure you don't touch my left leg, specifically on the portion that it was. I showed it to her. She said, no problem, all good. All right, I closed my eyes, I fell asleep, and this is where everything changed. I wake up to this lady not only touching the cut with her thumbs, but going over it with such intense pressure that she ripped the scratch and turned it into a cut. She literally ripped my skin on my leg, and I woke up screaming. Now, of course, the pain intensified very, very quick because my leg was just like ripped open a little bit. And I went straight to the pharmacy. I was limping. I was by myself. And I took more peroxide, more iodine, more whatever the hell they had over there to put it on my leg to make sure this thing doesn't get infected. I wrap this thing in a bandage, and I go out to meet some friends that I met on the island. We're out, and within a 60-minute period, my leg went from a level like 5 to a level 8 or a 9 out of 10 real quick in terms of pain. Now, I'm saying, well, what do I do? I'm not going to call my family. They didn't want me coming here in the first place. They're going to freak out. I don't want to freak them out. I don't want to upset them. I don't want to worry them. I'll take care of this on my own. I went back to the hotel room. I thought, I'm going to go to sleep. I'm going to wake up and everything's going to be just fine. Well, I went to sleep, and I must have woken up about 6, 7, maybe 8 times. And I thought it was already the next day in the afternoon because I thought that I was in bed for so long. It turns out that I went to sleep around midnight. I woke up the last time around 6 a.m. and I decided, listen, there is a major problem here. This is pain that I've never experienced before. I gotta call my family. So my phone is charging on the other side of the room, about 15, 18 feet away from me. It took me 45 minutes to crawl from my bed, to get onto the floor, to get to the phone to make a phone call. That's how excruciating this pain was. It's pain that I don't even know how I endured without fainting, to be honest. But I got there, I made the phone call, I'm crying, I'm screaming, I don't know what to do. I called my family. They said, Jason, you're getting on the next flight out. You're getting the hell out of there and you're coming home immediately. I said, no problem, just get me a flight. And I'm screaming and I'm crying and I don't know what to do. I just don't want to freak them out, but I can't stand the pain. Within a 15-minute period, my mom called me and she told me, Jason, you have a flight home. You're leaving from Koh Samui, the island I was on, in 1 hour. You're going from Koh Samui to Bangkok, from Bangkok to Hong Kong, and from Hong Kong home. It was a 26-hour period of flying overall with layovers in between. But I had no choice, I had to do it. So I told her, no problem. Is there any way you can get me a seat that turns into a bed? I cannot put my leg down. I cannot sit like a person. My leg is hot. My leg is red. My leg is hard. I'm screaming. I'm crying. I don't know what to do. I need help. I need a bed. I cannot sit. She said, no problem. You got it. So I called the front desk of the hotel that I was at and I said, I need help. I need a car straight to the airport and I need help packing my bags. I'll explain when you come here. Immediately they sent a few guys. They helped me just stuff everything into my suitcase and they put me on the dolly because there was no wheelchair. I'm sitting on this dolly with my leg raised up pretty much close to my shoulder because I couldn't put it down. There was too much pain when I put it down. So I'm sitting with my leg up. I get to the airport in Koh Samui, they put me on a wheelchair. Now the pain is so excruciating. I didn't know what to do next. I needed some sort of drug to take this pain away and nobody has anything to give me. So I bought a full pack of cigarettes and I chain smoked them just to get some sort of high from nicotine or something. I didn't know what to do. And I'm sitting here at 18 years old with my legs suspended up in the air, chain smoking cigarettes, not understanding what's about to happen next. I get onto the plane in Koh Samui, we take off, we go to Bangkok. Thank God somebody was nice enough to give me the front row seat so I could put my leg against the wall in the front row because I couldn't put it down. About an hour flight past, we get to Bangkok. So I land in the Bangkok airport and they take me to the airport's hospital just to check my leg to make sure everything's okay. And I called my dad and I said, listen, I don't know what to do. I have a problem. If they touch my leg, I'm going to scream. And he said, Jason, if you scream, they may not allow you to get on that flight. Don't make a noise. Let them check it out. Let them rebandage it and get on the plane. And I said, okay, no problem. I was on a stretcher. I was holding the metal bars as hard as I could. They undid the bandage. Everybody was laughing at me because they saw this little cut and they didn't understand why I was in so much pain. It ended up working to my benefit because they didn't take it so seriously, so I was able to get on the plane. Now I'm on my way to Hong Kong. So I land in the Hong Kong airport. I have about 2 hours before my last flight home, which was a very long flight. It was about 16 hours. I finally board the plane. I get on the plane, and thank God I had a chair that could turn into a bed so I could lay down. The only thing was from taking off and landing so much in such a short period of time, from the flights from Koh Samui to Bangkok to Hong Kong and now home, my leg was getting even more inflamed, and it was getting even harder from the pressure changes. That 16-hour flight home was the most agonizing 16 hours I've ever experienced in my life. It was so bad that I couldn't even get up to go to the bathroom. So the flight attendants had to bring me a styrofoam box so I can pee into on my side while they covered me. And I'll never forget, the flight attendants were crying from seeing the scene that they were experiencing. I was crying, I was screaming. There were people in first class that were coming and saying, "Hey, please take my seat. You can take my seat." I couldn't even get up to take the better seat. That's the type of pain we're talking about now. So we land, and my family is there waiting for me. And my dad looks at me and he said, "Okay, you're all good. We're gonna take you home. We'll put some peroxide. Everything's gonna be okay." And I said, "Take me to the hospital right now." And everybody in my family knows that I don't go to hospitals unless it's absolutely necessary. I was screaming and cursing, "Take me to the hospital right now." So they took me to St. Francis Hospital right here in Long Island, New York. And I'll never forget, it was a Friday night. It was about midnight. And generally hospitals are packed on Friday nights at midnight. Very few people were there. So they were able to give me the attention that I needed. Only when I got there, the nurse also saw that, yeah, I'm screaming and freaking out, but it's just this little cut. So she told me everything's gonna be okay, go to sleep. Our surgeons are gonna be here first thing tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. And I couldn't even answer her. I wanted to answer her, but the only thing I could do was scream on the top of my lungs from the pain that I was experiencing. I was screaming, I was crying, my family didn't know what to do, and I definitely didn't know what to do. And here's where it gets interesting. That same night, while I was screaming on the top of my lungs in pain in the hospital, there was a man who's a plastic surgeon who was called in by his friend to see her son who was in the hospital. So he came off hours just to check out his friend's son. And on his way out of the hospital, he heard my screams and he asked somebody, "What's going on there? Who is that?" And they said, "Oh, it's this 18-year-old kid." And he said, "An 18-year-old kid shouldn't be screaming like that. I'm gonna go check it out." So he came and he introduced himself. And he said, "What's the problem here?" And I'm screaming and I'm trying to answer him, but I can't. I'm in too much pain. And he comes close to my leg and he feels the heat and he sees this red line is rising and rising now from closer to my ankle from where the cut was all the way up to my knee. And I'll never forget the words that he said. He said, "Jason, I'm not a gambler, but if I had to bet on it, if we don't drain your leg right now, this very second, you may not have it tomorrow morning." And I looked at him and I said, "Doc, do whatever you have to do. Just help me. I need help." And he said, "But there's a catch." I said, "What's the catch?" And he said, "We can't numb you. There's too much abscess in your leg. We're just going to have to do it raw." And I knew exactly what that meant, but I didn't care because of the level of pain that I was in. And I looked at him dead in the eyes and I said, "Doc, just do what you have to do. I need you to help me." So they started prepping their tools and their scissors and their knives. And they held me down to that stretcher. And the doctor took a scissor and just put it straight into my shin, straight into my leg, straight into that cut. And the pain that I experienced in that moment was pain that I'll never forget in my entire life. It was pain that I don't wish on even the most evil people in this world. It was horrific. And 200 cc's of liquid, the equivalent of the amount of liquid that fits in an entire Coca-Cola can, came out of my leg. A bunch of abscess. It turns out I had a staph infection. The next morning when that doctor came to check on me, I'll never forget, he looked me in the eyes and he said, "Jason, if we didn't do what we did yesterday, you wouldn't have had your leg today." He told me that from the time that I came in, I had 8 hours until my leg would have had to be amputated, and 48 hours until the infection hit my heart and killed me. Now, I will remind you that the nurse said, wait till tomorrow, surgeons will be in at 8 a.m. That was exactly 8 hours. I would not have had my leg. But I thank God every day that He sent that angel in disguise as a doctor to walk down the hall and just so happened to hear my screams, to come and help me that very second, no matter how painful it was. He saved my life. And not just the physical aspect, but the spiritual aspect as well. Because as horrifying as this experience was for me, it was the best experience of my life. I spent a week in the hospital after that emergency surgery. I lost 40 pounds. I was being filled with intravenous antibiotics for the first time in my life. I even spent my 19th birthday in that hospital bed. And with all of that, it was the first time that I was forced to actually look at myself and ask myself, who have you become? And who are you really? It was the first time that I started remembering who I really was. One morning I woke up in the hospital and it was so quiet that I heard the beat of my heart. And I paid attention to the fact that the only reason the heart is beating is because of the moments of silence in between, the moments of stillness in between. And it gave me this new activation and understanding of, oh my God, stillness and silence and presence is where it all exists. So from that point moving forward, I said, you know what? I'm going to buy a journal. I'm going to start writing and reflecting. You know what? I'm going to buy a book because I've never read a book in my life until this point. So that's exactly what I did. I bought a journal. I started writing. I bought books. I started reading. I deleted all my social media accounts and I started spending time with me. I started befriending myself again, getting to know who I really was and who I really am. And I can tell you today that I'm still on that journey. But it all started from the biggest hardship that I've ever experienced in my life, with the most excruciating pain that I've ever gone through in my life. And I've been through pain from dislocating this shoulder 23 times to breaking it to having a staph infection that almost killed me. I've been through pain. But that scissor going through my leg was the worst pain I have ever experienced and the greatest gift that I have ever been given. In just a short period of time, just about over 5 years, I'm sitting where I am today because of that experience. Now, it's not just the experience, but it's what was done with that experience that matters. And that brings us back to the lesson in the beginning of the video. It's not about how old you are. It's not about your age. It's about what you do with the experiences that you receive. What you do with the experiences that you go through. So much can be done in such a short period of time if we just take our experiences as lessons. What I've learned from my very few years here on earth, in this form at least, is the fact that life really is like a school, and we're being tested all the time. Now, just like in school, if you're in 5th grade and you need to take a test to get to 6th grade and you fail the test, well, you will keep aging, but you will stay in 5th grade. That's why there are so many people, whether they're 50 or 60 or 70 or 80, that are still dealing with tests from when they were 20 or 25 or 30 years old, in some cases even 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 years old, that were not passed. My point is, again, it's not all about age, and it's not all about experience. The lesson that I've learned is it's what you do with that experience. And what the hardships that I've personally gone through in terms of my physical body and the injuries that I've experienced have taught me was the fact that we can take any experience, no matter how hard, and turn it into our greatest opportunity. The universe is always talking to us. God is always talking to us. All we have to do is listen. And sometimes its language is very interesting. It can happen through many different mediums, whether it's a disease, an illness, an injury, the loss of a job, the loss of a family member, the end of a relationship, whatever it may be, there is something to learn from every experience. And if there's one thing you take from me sharing my story with all of you today, let it be the fact that we are infinite beings with infinite potential. We can do absolutely anything we want if we put our minds to it. The only limitation exists in our beliefs. The only limitation exists in our minds. And tests will keep coming your way and keep repeating themselves until we learn from them, until you learn from them, and until we pass them both on the collective level and on the individual level. And in that way, that's why I always say what we're experiencing right now in the world is a blessing in disguise. Because the only thing that I recognize is my individual story, and I'm sure many of your individual stories happening on a global level. So with that, I thank you all for listening to my story and giving me the space to even share it in the first place. And thank you for being you. Remember, this story has nothing to do with me. Although I'm sharing certain lessons and things that I've learned through a personal lens, a little different than I usually do. This is a story that we can all learn from, and I know that many of you have your own stories that share the same lessons. So don't be afraid to share them, because we can all learn from each other. We can all grow together. And ultimately, I look forward to seeing how we're all going to grow together on the collective level. Thank you very much, and I love you all.